Chapter 34. Holding On.
The creature is returned. You must kill him now.
The voice echoed like an avalanche through Elam's mind, and he winced as the deep ringing tone continued to speak.
Its blood is tainted with impurity. It cannot be allowed to exist once I reclaim my body, and I will reclaim it one day, Elam. With or without your help. Though you would be foolish to continue denying my deal.
Elam took a deep breath and concentrated on his surroundings. The voice grew quiet usually when he was focused on other things. Yes, it was a cloudy day today. Perhaps it would rain and help cool his ever-warm flesh. Being an Ifrit, his bright red skin always felt feverish to the touch. It wasn't uncomfortable for him, of course, though the rain had always felt pleasant. People just didn't understand why he chose to go shirtless all the time. Did they not realize that an Ifrit would cook in those thick clothes humans normally wore? Elam could scarcely imagine wearing the plate armor that Twindle and Alistair both sported. Such armor would roast him like a turkey for sure. How could the other races handle being so cold that they could get away with wearing such garments? Elam could feel the voice beginning to brush his mind again, and he grit his teeth, turning his thoughts instead towards Hoplite. Elam needed to keep himself distracted long enough for the voice to reside. And Hoplite's presence was certainly distracting enough. Just the fact that he was an Outworlder was more than enough to draw Elam's thoughts away from the voice scratching at the back door of his mind. The Golem Man stood before the mayor of the Fiendwall and a crew of defenders, looming like the Ilum tree over Gali and his soldiers. Elam and Twindle, as well as the rest of their party, stood just ahead of the crowd of Fiendwallers who had gathered to stare in awe at the Outworlder. That tall elf girl, Lance, and the human Hoplite had taken from that fallen star stood just behind the towering metal man. The human, Elam could not remember his name, looked a bit uncomfortable being there. What was his name? Mimchel? Mikkel? It was one of those for sure. Elam didn't blame Mikkel. If it had been him on the end of those murderous glares that the Fiendwallers cast his way, Elam would be nervous too. The two were conversing not far from where Elam stood at the base of the now much smaller hill of rubble, filling the breach in the Fiendwall. The Fiendwallers had made much progress in clearing out the rubble, though Elam didn't quite know how they intended to rebuild the destroyed section. The Fiendwall had been just a single piece of stone raised from the bones of Arculus by Oros himself, not constructed in segments. It would be a patchwork of a job for sure. The voice began scratching again, and Elam scrunched up his brow as he stared at the wall. He had to keep himself distracted. Just a little bit longer, and then the voice would recede. Elam's eyes found the cross-sections of rooms, now empty of their contents to function as makeshift battlements. Archers kept their eyes toward the Fiendwood, most looking terribly bored by their now less eventful shifts. There were barely any fiends bothering the workers now. The tongues had made sure of that after Hoplite had left. Scratch. The Fiendwall had been originally just a slab of solid stone, Elam had learned. It had only been tunneled into by Greyshane's criminal populace. Apparently, the King of Greysshane had believed there to be a vast wealth in gems and gold within the wall, and had bored into it with an army of criminals under the supervision of a warden and his defenders. Scratch. Once all the wealth had been extracted from the wall, the king had decided that the Fiendwall would make a great extension to his kingdom. The elves of the Feywood hadn't approved of Greyshane's mining operations on the wall, but as they were busy fending off the Akandari at the time, they couldn't afford to send a strike force to bat away the Greyshane's greedy hands. Thus, Greyshane was able to completely get away with hollowing out the wall. That was what Gali had told him anyway. Now the Fiendwall was a penal colony with semi-independence from Greysshane. It was seen as a punishment to be sent to live here. Knowing that the fiends would always be scratching at the wall, seeking to spread their curse, made sleeping a burden most days. That was what he could gather from some of the locals, anyhow. Some of them had been born in the wall, but even more were sent to live here.
Stay focused on what I command you. Slay the creature standing before you now, unleash the silver flame and immolate the Outworlder in death.
The voice managed to get out.
Embrace the power I offer, and all here will be unable to harm you, Elam.
Do not speak to me, Elam whispered under his breath. I deny you.
Through me is the path to your salvation. To deny me is to deny life. Without my gifts, you will go mad. I deny you.
Elam hissed, gritting his teeth and clutching his graying arm, with enough force to force the bright red flesh of his knuckles to go white. Nails were driven into his temples, and he strained to keep himself from clutching at his skull from the pounding agony he felt. Elam struggled to keep from falling to the ground face first, something he certainly didn't want Twindle or any of the others to see. If Elam fell, he would begin screaming at the voice in his head. He just knew it. That would be a sight for everyone, if the party even suspected that he was beginning to go mad. But they wouldn't do that to him, would they? His friends could not. No, they would not. The gray flesh on his right arm seemed to undulate, as if it were amused by Elam's defiance. Suffer then, but I will always be here. I know that you will take my offer one day, Elam, and that day fast approaches. Your will is quickly decaying along with your sanity, and soon you will no longer be able to hold on to who you are. When you finally burn in the sea of your anguish, when your soul is nothing more than a pile of ash, I will be there to scrape up what remains. And just like that, the voice receded. Elam took a deep, shuddering breath, placing a hand to his brow, right as Twindle put a hand on his shoulder. He dearly hoped that she and the others hadn't heard his words. How could Elam explain that his own arm was trying to bargain with him for his sanity? Already they knew that the growth was causing him intense pain and random bursts. But Elam hadn't told them that it was also beginning to talk to him now. Twindle asked slowly, "Are you well? I can channel it to numb the pain if you need." Elam turned his head and flashed his best smile. "I'm fine. It's already subsided." Twindle's brows knit together in a rictus of concern, a look that wasn't rare on the woman. Elam feared that the stress was going to get to Twindle eventually. She had always been so concerned for the well-being of others, especially those of her party. Really, she could really pass for a doting mother, had her face borne any wrinkles or her hair any strands of silver. Being half-elf meant that age would not touch her for a long time. Not that any of them would live to reach old age, of course. Twindle insisted that there had to be a way to save themselves from what was coming, but Elam could not see it. He turned his head away from Twindle, feeling his false smile beginning to slip. Elam did not want his friends to see that he wasn't doing well. After all, he was supposed to be the overconfident, mischievous devil of the group. If he dragged himself about like Nolvi did, that would bring down everyone's mood. Elam needed to be confident that there was another option for their survival. Otherwise, he may have to seek other methods to keep himself sane. He clutched his graying arm as a small temptation began to fill him. He didn't have to go mad or kill anyone. There was a way for him to survive. No, he would not do that. He could not cave to the canker melded to his arm. If Elam did that, there would be no coming back. Twindle's hand finally released his shoulder, and Elam was thankful that she did. For while her hand had been there, Elam could feel the canker almost stretching itself across his flesh, almost as if it were reaching for Twindle. He pondered just cutting off his arm completely. It wasn't the first time he had considered it. But if Elam did that, then the creature's bargain too would be cut off. It was a hard thing to admit, but knowing that there was an option there to save himself from the madness, it was almost like a comfort. "I think they're done talking," Kidka said from behind him. "I'm not waiting any longer. Kazan must be put down." And just like that, the man moved past everyone, Kidka's crimson cape flowing in a sudden gust of wind that had emerged from the gap in the wall. For a moment, it seemed as if the wind were grieving, or screaming. Elam had a feeling that there would be plenty of both once they were through the wall. As Kidka went, so did all the rest, with Twindle marching right behind Kidka, urging patience. Elam took a deep breath to steady himself as the rest of the party passed by him. Alistair was fixing Hoppet with an intense gaze. One Elam couldn't quite get a read on. Was he going to ask Hoplite something, or was he going to demand the Outworlder's boots? Elam couldn't quite tell. Nolvi trailed along just behind him, her eyes ever glued to the ground. Elam wished that he could just live in Nolvi's world for 5 minutes. surely that could be enough time to understand why she behaved that way. It was a miracle the girl didn't just slam into every obstacle in her path. Theopolis, the only member of the party that was unafflicted with her condition, chomped down on an entire loaf of bread as he passed, the wind blowing some crumbs from the elf's maw. That old piece of knife-eared jerky was the best chance they had to get through the Fiendwood to reach Kazan. He had to be kept alive above anyone else, even his friends. For without Theopolis, there was no way they could make it through the Fiendwood unscathed. He just had to hold on to himself, at least until he could get his vengeance on Kazan. Who knew? Maybe the gods would look favorably upon whoever slayed the Lord of Hatred. If they were to offer him a reward, Elam knew what he would ask for. He put on his confident smirk as he stepped forward to meet Hoplite along with the others. Maybe there was a different way. Perhaps the Outworlders possessed something that would be able to stave off what was to come. Wishful thinking, true. But Elam needed to keep his hopes high in the coming days. There would be more than enough time to ask Hoplite when they were all properly away from the Fiendwallers. He'd need to word the questions carefully to conceal the truth behind them. After all, if Hoplite found out that Elam and his friends were all Pillarborn, who knew what he would do? Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story and join the Discord if you like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, but remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.